This is one of those services where I begin with a confession, and I'm just going to go ahead and get it over with. Here it is. Yes, it is true. I actually like the winter holidays. I look forward to them. I am sad, in fact, when it's time to put up the lights and the 12 days of Christmas balls, which are part of our tree setup, and the giant light-up pig, which somehow has become part of our holiday decorations. And when I have to stop listening to carols every year. You know, given my profession, this is actually a happier place to be than some of my colleagues who have to kind of get themselves through this season, this month, every year. But I love the rituals and the traditions and the ways that we have to connect with one another. And though it has seemed to me that over the years, these holidays have become increasingly just a series of shopping events that are strung together, I have to say that I like that they are strung out in that way, that they come in this collection every year for us. I am particularly fond of Christmas lights. I like the stories of the season, the music of the season, and I even sometimes could be caught, as I was on a plane last Sunday night, watching hokey Christmas movies. Now, I want to, redeem myself a little bit by saying this is kind of a darkness and a light, kind of both and thing for me. I recognize that there are always compromises and difficulties in these holidays. What I want to say, though, is that the message of these holidays has somehow spoken out to me even when I was a child and they were often difficult, and even as an adult on the more challenging times in this holiday season. There is something about this season that moves me in a particular way. And this year, because 2018 is the year that it is, I became very interested in trying to parse out what exactly that is. I set out on an exploration to discover the sources of my enjoyment of these holidays. And what I found at the heart was a spirit of abundance. Now, I want to be really clear about abundance. When I say abundance, I do not mean excess, because excess is also part of this holiday season, right? An excess of buying, an excess of eating, and if anyone has ever consumed a healthy plurality of a carton of eggnog, you can attest that excess can be really difficult. I have perhaps done that. But no, abundance is different. Abundance is that feeling that there is enough, so we don't have to choose between people we love or between passions or things that we love, that there's enough that we don't have to villainize some so that we can celebrate others. There is a feeling that we won't want if others have what they need in this season. The story of Hanukkah, as Beth reminded us, is the story of something which exceeded its expectations, and the Christmas narrative is one about the plenitude of persistence and wonder. And when we bang pots together on the solstice in a week or so, we're asking once again for that leap forward towards abundance of light and warmth and growth. In 2018, this year with so much need and so much anguish, many are trying to figure out exactly how they should connect with these holidays. People are talking to me about it, saying, what should we do? I don't know. It feels sometimes like we are flagships of abundance in a world that's caught up in a massive scarcity narrative. We've been caught up as a society in this nation, and increasingly as a world citizen, in promoting a global myth of scarcity. We have been caught up and taken to believe that the world's resources are so scarce that all cannot share or partake in them, that we are entitled in this nation to higher levels of consumption than many others on this planet, and that our consumption and lifestyle should not be compromised so that others may have basic needs met. We have, in fact, in this growing mythology around scarcity, been taught to fear those who want just basic shelter, food, those roofs over their heads. And meanwhile, a few among us quietly are eating their own Christmas feasts and getting richer than Scrooge. So what has abundance to do with all of that? Christmas lights are an extension of the candles which once donned Christmas trees. That's kind of a scary thought for us. But they were brought to this nation after a celebration of Christmas was banned for several decades, especially in the New England area. And it was a more festive way to call the attention to the spirit of this holiday, which was brought to this nation by a small group of internationally connected Unitarian ministers and writers who were also fighting for the radical notion that enslaving other human beings in our nation was wrong. This was a time when they brought the Christmas tree to us from across the seas, when the cause of abolition was not popular in many circles, including among ours, when it was seen as too radical. Those who supported it were seen as extremists, just as those who are fighting now to invite us to see the humanity of those seeking asylum at our borders or fighting against modern forms of racism and homophobia and transphobia are painted with the identity politics brush now among us, scorned and shunned. The Reverend Charles Follen, who decided he wanted his young son to see a Christmas tree, was a minister who wanted to bring more joy to the holidays for his son, for the children, but also for his fellow abolitionists who were tired, who were distraught, who often lost their livelihood fighting to convince others that slavery was wrong. He thought the German tradition of the Christmas tree would be a way of renewing spirit, a sense of wonder, a sense of abundance. Bah humbug, you might say. And if you did, you would be channeling another of our Unitarian stable, for Charles Dickens was also converted to Unitarianism in our shores when he was visiting from his home in England, and he brought his faith back with him. He was a writer who helped write that charitable note into the Christmas chord. It was actually his writings that began to identify the season of the year as a time when we give to those with fewer resources, and that too is from our tradition. On this day, in this year, when most of our ministry team is preparing to pay witness to the troubles on our borders, when many of our fellow Californians, too many of them without many economic resources, are preparing for their first Christmas after the deadly fires that climate change brought us yet another year, when too many of our neighbors are living in cars because they can't afford that roof over their head that Elizabeth Alexander's song asked us to provide. Why is abundance even a thing? Those who would call for it are certainly to be mocked and bullied in a blizzard of tweets as we continue to be taught only to trust the market and emulate the rich among us. Abundance, that sense of plenty, may be what we need just along with hope and possibilities. And I spent some time, some of you know my etymological dictionary is actually my sacred text. So I delved in for the purposes of this service, and I looked up some things, and it was very interesting what I found. The word hope is related to the word hop, which I won't do too much because of my ankle, but hop. And it means to move forward. And the word possibility is actually tied to the word posse, and also the idea of a forward movement. And it's interesting that this action is not rooted just in the individual, but in a collective action, something that we move forward together. The word abundance is actually related to the word undulate, to move, a flowing movement forward. So this time of year when the light is, as it is this morning, a little bit more scarce, when we are called specifically to focus on our inner resources, the celebrations of abundance keep us in forward movement, even if it's just a little hop, a little step, a little roll forward. Though countercultural, I believe this movement matters. Why do I believe it? Type the word hope sucks into a search engine and you will see why I believe this is important. You will see more entries than you can shake a stick at. You will see more entries for that particular phrase than if you type in abundance matters. By the way, I tried that. Cynicism and jadedness are all around us. They're easy. Many of us have had Christmases where we felt less fortunate. We might be having one now. where loss and harm and circumstance are a sludge which holds us down, and every jolly utterance of the season is like fingernails on a chalkboard, another weight. Our addictions to possessing and owning, which are driven by this constant marketing we live in, can drive us to desperation in this season, as can that culture of perfectionism, which says we must do things exactly the right way. Many forms of inaction are possible, and with that paralysis comes a sense of scarcity. Now, one of the gifts I was given this year, not a Christmas gift, but earlier this year, was a book by Mark Manson, and it's called The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F***. It's a very popular contemporary book. But what's interesting is that in it, Manson talks about the need to act rather than to be paralyzed by inaction. What if no one was willing to try to keep the lamp burning, saying, why light it? We don't have enough oil anyway. What if the wise ones decided not to follow the star? What if the sun decides to stop moving towards us? Movement and hope, possibility and abundance. This time of year can be hard on us, especially in this culture of hyper-capitalism and the toxicity that brings, and the ways that many families among us struggle in small ways and large, and the magnifying glass of the holidays seems to make them all larger. In 2018, cultivating a sense of abundance requires mindfulness, a particular non-judgmental mindfulness. We need to develop those muscles that train us to note the small signs of abundance around us. Jon Kabat-Zinn has 9 practices of mindfulness, which I am considering etching on another set of Christmas balls and adding it to the 12 days of Christmas and that weird light-up giant pig that we have in our house. But here are his 9 practices. I think they're worth actually considering each year in this season. He says we should begin with a beginner's mind, we should be non-judgmental, we should be accepting, we should let go, we should be non-striving and patient and trusting and have gratitude and generosity. All of those lenses allow us to be present to what is and not caught up in what has been or what might be. And what I want to say about Kabat-Zinn's work is that this is not religious mumbo-jumbo for those of you who have too much of that in this season. He's an MIT-trained molecular biologist who works for the University of Massachusetts Medical School, where he has been an early adapter of meditation for pain management and stress and addiction and other conditions. Mindfulness, he says, is the first stepping off point for all of that. In this season, many are in pain, and speaking out against hope is one way that it seems like might make that pain feel better. Suggesting that hope is too thin a resource to offer in a world that has so much to be healed may have some resonance with some of you. But yet I like this idea of hope as possibility, as that small movement forward, as part of that flow of motion that is abundance. Moving water instead of stagnation. That is something to celebrate. Mark Manson notes that he learned from a beloved science teacher a couple important lessons. That inspiration leads to motivation, which leads to action, which leads to inspiration, which leads to motivation, and that it's an ongoing loop, so you have to start somewhere. At the heart of the abundance factor in these holidays can be that attention and mindfulness, which can start us again on that loop into action. In 1837, Reverend Follen remarked to his wife, "Had I been willing to lower my standard of right, the world would have been with me, and I might have obtained its favor." This was just a few years before his untimely death. Instead, he lived by the lines he sent to Unitarian journalist Harriet Martineau. She wrote, "These principles in which we live and move and have our being, though as old as the creation of humankind, are still a new doctrine, the elements of a new covenant, even in civilized, republican, Christian America. They are the bread and wine of the altar to which all are invited, but which few partake, because they may have to be redeemed by martyrdom." In every time, his words say to us, there have been some who have the clearer vision, that calmer lens that sees the abundance before the rest of us do, and we are proud to count many of them among our spiritual ancestors. I believe that it is worth taking the time to find the abundance because the religious values of the season bind us to a larger view of what we all can be together, how we can be that posse moving forward together. Without them, we are pulled into a swirling expanse of buying, owning, and fearing to protect what we own, which is rapidly becoming the national religion. You know, it's interesting that we dismiss other nations where the religion of the ruler is the religion of the nation. And yet, could it be that we are seeing it happen here as well? What else but a powerful ideology could make it okay for hordes of workers to move into cities and think nothing of displacing the residents who lived there, who move them farther and farther out until we see them on our streets or in their cars on our streets? What else could let us allow children to remain this holiday season in detention among us and others to be separated at our borders or suffering there as well? What else could allow us to see so little of the dangers of our changing planet and our climate? This is all what we live with. And yet in this holiday season, we can turn it into a fetish of false joy, or we can make these holidays into a desert of cynicism and despair, or we can make the choice to hop forward into that promise of love and hope. We can look down fearful of who will challenge our scarcity mentality, or we can look up towards those chandeliers of hope that our musical offering gave us. I believe that abundance, that spirit of abundance, that is uniquely possible in this season, is why I celebrate and cherish it. In this world so obsessed with a possessive sense of scarcity, may we accept and re-gift this abundance again and again. Let us take up the eyes of a child and be glad for even the smallest moments of wonder. Let us join the timeless wisdom of mourners and grieve what is lost, but open our hearts to what can be. Let us jump into the flow of movement which says every year that a better year is possible in the next year. Let us see through enlivened eyes, the eyes of mindfulness and abundance, what our hardened hearts may have forgotten, that we might always, always look forward towards a star in the east, or a light on a tree, or a hope in our heart.